Welcome back everyone to my channel, Screaming into the Void, where I talk about subjects related to my books. Today we're going to be talking about one of the big reasons that I now sleep in on Sunday mornings. Church perverts. These aren't headlines, these aren't distant scandals, these are mine. I can preface this by saying that during the years I was growing up in a mainline Presbyterian church that had a fairly progressive theology, I was never inappropriately bothered by any men, young or old. That would be between 1969 and 1987, the year I moved away to college. I also never had this problem at the mainline Presbyterian and Episcopal churches where I attended during college and young adulthood, which would be the late 1980s and through the 1990s. Those years were also the years when I was at my hottest. For those of you who claim that these poor men just can't help themselves, this is me back then. Some of you will recognize this as a mall glamour shot, and you would be absolutely right. This was me at peak mall culture, feathered hair and all. Still, no creeps. I'm sure there were things going on back then of which I had no knowledge. At home, behind closed doors. In public, especially in places like churches, there was a higher standard of politeness back then. People still dressed up to attend church, and you were expected to be on your best behavior at all times. This all seemed to change in the early 2000s. Something shifted. It wasn't theological. It was personal, and it was disturbing. So let's travel back to that time. I was in my 30s. Married, raising a small child, and deeply rooted in a church that I loved. It was a mainline Presbyterian church similar to the one in which I grew up. My son Henry was baptized there. I had a lot of church friends, and I really liked the pastors. When my son was old enough to give me a little bit of a break, say around 2002, I joined the choir. And this turned out to be one of the absolute best musical experiences of my life. And it set me on the path of early music that became a major influence in my life for the next 30 years. I was also a deacon and involved in youth ministry. I was part of a group of people who invested time in this church, planning things and decorating and just generally keeping things going. It isn't a coincidence that the series of events I'm about to describe happened in the early 2000s. As this is when white evangelical Christianity started to infiltrate the mainline Protestant churches. Up until then, they tended to be off by themselves in non-denominational churches and were not really mainstream. The rest of us regular churchgoers thought that they were a bit fringe. But to each his own. I don't remember encountering them at all until my last 2 years of high school or college. If you're interested in how this movement developed and created a large conglomerate of media companies, broadcasters, programs, and advertising, you can check out some very well-researched books like Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation, and I'll put a link in the description. This book really helped me to understand the cultural context around what I was experiencing. If you've ever wondered why this brand of Christianity seems to attract boundary pushers, we'll unpack that in a future video. But for now, I'm just going to describe my experiences. So anyway, back to 2002. I had just finished hanging up my choir robe and putting my music away after the service. My son was off in the back of the nave with his little Sunday school pals, running around and screaming like banshees. I walked into the church social hour looking forward to a donut and some time catching up with my friends. That's when I saw him. Or worse, he saw me. Gray-haired, dorky-looking dude, about 6'4", wearing a button-down collar shirt and carrying a giant Bible under his arm. New to our church and looking for his fourth divorce. I kid you not, this guy looked at me like he was going to run over and start humping my leg. I immediately turned around and walked back out and made my way to my son through a back hallway, nabbed him, and made a stealthy exit through the side door. Unfortunately, he picked up on my evasive maneuvers and was waiting to hijack me at the gate leading out of the cemetery next door. He was built like a linebacker, blocking the only exit like a human barricade. I had to stop. "What's your name?" he bubbled, bouncing from one leg to the other and barely able to contain his excitement. Laura, I growled. And where do you live? Sharpsburg, I muttered, rolling my eyes. At this point, my 4-year-old son fixed in with what my husband likes to call his little hateful look, where you can almost imagine the horns poking out. He locks eyes with this guy and he says, "Yeah, with my father." This caught him totally off guard. So while he was busy picking his jaw up off the pavement, I grabbed Henry's hand and whisked him away. When we got to the car, I gave him a high five and told him just how proud I was. That moment, legendary. How many 4-year-olds can think on their feet like that? It was funny, yes, but also deeply unsettling. My son saw what I saw, and that's not something any parent wants to witness. Oh, and it gets much worse. Oh, so much worse. Because the next Thursday, he showed up at choir rehearsal. Recently, my granddaughter said to me, "You can sexually harass someone without ever touching them." And she's young. And she gets it. And I wish more adults did. During that choir rehearsal, I was in the front row and this guy was in the back. I could feel on the back of my neck this guy staring at me like a starving man would look at a big juicy steak. You could doubt yourself. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you're imagining. So you do the look back. And yep. So then the choir director says, "Let's stand up and give that a try." And when you stand up, you feel exposed, like your body is no longer yours, like something on display. You do the sneaky little check again. Yep. So now, instead of enjoying choir rehearsal, I'm getting creeped out with this jerk checking out my ass all night. Afterwards, I tried to ignore him and just talk to my friends, but he would force his way into these conversations, almost pushing them out of the way, and they'd glance at me like, "What is it with this guy?" And at the church the following Sunday, he's sitting there behind me, having scored a seat where he has a full, unobstructed view of me. And while we're singing, and while we're praying, and all during the sermon, you get the idea. And again, I leave as soon as church is over to get away from him. Miss the coffee hour, miss seeing my friends. He didn't just invade my space, he stole my community. Week by week, I slipped away from the joy I'd built there. By this point, he'd earned a nickname, the Predator. I wasn't just uncomfortable. I was being driven out of a space I loved, and that's how predators win, by making you disappear. So this goes on a couple weeks. I'm starting to worry that he's going to follow me to my car because he's been there long enough now to scope out all the various exit routes I'd been using. And he's pretty much 100% ruined my church experience at this point. So I decided to talk to the pastor about it. So I called him up and I told him this whole story. "Oi, you're the first woman to complain about the exact same thing this week," he sighed. "I talked to the choir director and we're going to sit down and have a meeting with him about it. I'll call you later in the week and let you know how it went." So later that week, the pastor calls me back. They sat him down and had a come to Jesus meeting with him, pun intended, and explained that several women had complained about his inappropriate, flirty, and/or sexual behavior. They told him it needed to stop immediately and that he was to stay away from me and probably several others. So he weaponized shame, not his own, but theirs. And they fell for it. "You should have seen him. He was so embarrassed, so shocked, so humiliated," the pastor told me. "I'm confident that now it's been brought to his attention, he'll stop it." Being younger then and less educated about these things, I accepted their conclusions. But he manipulated them. He played them big time. In their defense, it's unlikely that they'd attended a class or a conference on what to do in this scenario. They were working with the knowledge that they had, and it was woefully inadequate for dealing with this kind of a person. The predator was kind of subdued at the next choir rehearsal, and while I caught him looking at me a couple times, the obvious leering had stopped. Afterwards, I was able to hang around and talk to friends without him inserting himself, and I relaxed a little. I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. But predators don't change. They adapt. At the next choir rehearsal, the director asked me if I could repair some zippers on some choir robes since he knows that I sew. I said sure, and he gave me a couple robes, and he told me that one of them belonged to this predator guy, and I could just return a robe to him so that I wouldn't have to talk to him. So I took the robes home, and I fixed them, and I brought them back before the service on the next Sunday and returned them to the choir director. After the church social hour, the predator approached me while I was standing with my then husband. He thanked me for repairing the robe, and thinking all was okay now, I said, "No problem, you're welcome." At that point, he leaned in, right there, in front of my husband, at church, during coffee hour. He leaned in and tried to kiss me. I ducked and he missed. And then I looked over at then husband and saw him laughing. My first impulse was to smack the shit out of both of them, but remembering that I was at church coffee hour, I decided if I did lay them both out, I would probably be the one not being asked back. I didn't just feel violated. I felt abandoned by the man beside me and by the institution around me. So I just walked away. Later in the car, after I'd had a chance to cool off, I asked then husband why he didn't defend me. "What did you want me to do? Say, get your filthy hands off my wife?" Well, actually, yeah. or maybe leave her alone, or what's wrong with you? Two more ideas that just happened to come to mind. It wasn't just his silence, it was his laughter. That told me exactly where I stood, and this is one of the reasons why he became an ex-husband. After I'd broken the taboo by answering the predator, his behavior started right back up again. I considered talking to the pastor again, but it hadn't worked the first time, and I didn't have much confidence that another confrontation would do any good. He'd just find some other way to appease the church leadership. So I went to a couple older ladies and asked them for advice. They suggested that maybe he was just a socially awkward geek who didn't know how to behave in polite society, and they could come alongside him and disciple him. Of course, since I was the target, I shouldn't be expected to do this. As older women, they would take it on. That lasted about a week. They declared him hopeless, and they were done trying to reform him. I really don't even know what he did to make them that angry. So I continued avoiding him, and I did my best to ignore him. And I wasn't willing to give up that easy. This was my sanctuary. He had barged in and poisoned it, and yet somehow I was the one that had to adapt. Meanwhile, he'd started doing some evangelizing of his own. Turns out, he was once a geek who was afraid to speak up until he joined the Toastmasters, an organization created to help people overcome their fear of public speaking. Now, at every rehearsal and every social hour, he was evangelizing Toastmasters to anyone he could corner or trap in a conversation, all about how Toastmasters changed his life. And in this case, Toastmasters inadvertently created a monster. Toastmasters gave him a voice. Unfortunately, they didn't give him a conscience. He soon found himself back in the head pastor's office, being told to stop endlessly evangelizing Toastmasters. It's a great organization, but this is a church and we evangelize Jesus, not Toastmasters. And as a reminder, stay the hell away from Laura and probably a bunch of others who remain anonymous. I lasted for about a year before I finally gave up and left that church. How do you pray, sing, worship when someone's gaze feels like a butcher sizing up meat? Especially after I initiated my divorce and I was worried about how much he would escalate once he found out I was about to become single. I may have left the building, but I didn't leave the fight. If you're a man and you don't get what this feels like, imagine you're walking in the woods and you notice there's a bear following you and staring at you like you're the most delicious morsel he's ever seen. That's what it feels like to women when you guys do this. It's not flattering and it's certainly not welcome. So on behalf of all women, don't do this. Thanks in advance for choosing decency over denial. If you're not all men, then you can help. You can help make the world a better place by calling out other men when you see them doing this shit. Speak up, make it awkward, break the silence, unless you're only defending us because you're actually trying to groom us for something even more heinous, which is the subject for the next video. Like and subscribe so you're notified when I upload that next video in my Perverts in the Pews series, Chester the Molester, because silence protects predators and we are done being silent. Have you had an experience like this at church? If so, please leave a comment. Also, please like this video and subscribe, as this is a new channel and any bit of engagement helps. I do not have a join button, and I do not have a Patreon, and I'm not asking you for money. I am fortunate that I still have a corporate job and a paycheck, and even though I'm not to mention their name, thank you. If you want to support me beyond that, just buy my books. Links are below in the description. Till then, stay safe and keep choosing that bear.